All right, everybody, buckle up. Because today we're taking a deep dive into the mind of Albert Einstein. But get this, we're not just talking relativity and insidia today.
No, not at all.
This time, we're peeling back the layers to uncover the man behind the mind-blowing theories.
The person behind the icon.
Exactly. And lucky for us, we've got a fascinating script packed with little-known facts about Einstein. Should be interesting, to say the least.
It really highlights how even someone like Einstein, whose name is synonymous with genius, was a complex individual with his own set of quirks and contradictions.
It's kind of wild to think about, right? I mean, this is Einstein we're talking about. But get this.
Yeah.
The father of modern physics was actually a late talker.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Apparently, he barely spoke a word until he was 3 years old. It just goes to show that brilliance doesn't always fit neatly into our preconceived notions.
It really makes you question those labels we put on people, doesn't it? Like problematic student.
Oh, tell me about it. They slapped that label on Einstein, too.
It's hard to believe, considering he basically rewrote our understanding of the universe. But it just goes to show you how much we try to categorize and pigeonhole brilliance, when in reality it can manifest in ways we least expect.
Totally. Like maybe little Albert wasn't thriving in that rigid school system. By age 12, though, this so-called problem was teaching himself geometry.
Talk about a thirst for knowledge.
Right. He was clearly a kid who marched to the beat of his own intellectual drum. It's that inherent curiosity, that drive to understand the world around him that really set him apart.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that his intellectual curiosity wasn't confined to the realms of science and math.
You're talking about his love for music? I was wondering when we'd get to that. Who knew Einstein was a secret virtuoso on the violin?
And it wasn't just a casual hobby for him.
Really? Tell me more.
Einstein often described music as a tool for thought, a way to unlock new perspectives and approach problems from a different angle. He even said once, "If I were not a physicist, I would probably be a musician. I often think in music. I live my daydreams in music. I see my life in terms of music."
Wow. So while the rest of us are just trying to relax with a little Mozart, he was out here using music to crack the cosmic code. Mind-blowing.
It really challenges our traditional understanding of intelligence and creativity, doesn't it? It suggests that there's so much more to the equation than just logic and analysis.
I like that. More to the equation. All right, well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Einstein's personal life, because from what I've heard, it wasn't always smooth sailing.
That's putting it mildly. Even a mind as brilliant as Einstein's couldn't escape the complexities of love and family.
Yeah, and speaking of complex, can we talk about the whole mystery surrounding his first child, Liza? It's almost like a hidden chapter in his life.
It really is. It's hard to imagine what really transpired, but the fact that so much about Liza remains unknown speaks volumes about the societal pressures and expectations of the time.
It's a good reminder that even geniuses like Einstein were living in a very different world with very different social norms.
Absolutely. And the illegitimate child, especially for someone in his position, would have been scandalous. You have to wonder how those societal constraints might have influenced his choices, even as he was breaking down barriers in the scientific world.
It's easy to forget that even the most brilliant minds are still subject to the pressures and expectations of their time. It humanizes them, you know.
Absolutely. And speaking of relationships, the contrasting dynamics of his two marriages offer even more insight into this very human side of Einstein.
Yeah, so we were talking about Einstein's marriages and how different they were. His second wife, Elsa, was actually a distant relative of his.
That's right, his cousin.
Wild. So was she like a scientific mind like him, or was their connection more on, a different level?
Well, while Elsa Einstein undoubtedly provided stability and companionship, especially during what was a pretty tumultuous period in his life, I don't think their relationship had that same intellectual spark that we saw with Mileva.
So a different kind of connection.
Exactly.
Makes you think about how even someone like Einstein, who seemed to have such a grasp on the universe and its workings, still had to navigate those very human and often messy aspects of relationships.
Right. It reminds us that genius doesn't necessarily come with a relationship playbook.
Definitely not. But speaking of complicated legacies, can we shift gears a bit and dive into Einstein's connection to the atomic bomb?
Yeah, it's a heavy topic.
Because talk about a moral paradox, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a man known for his pacifism, his hatred of violence, yet he played a part in creating the most destructive weapon the world had ever seen.
It's one of those historical twists that really makes you stop and think. How could the man who gave us Sat also have a hand in the atomic bomb.
Yeah, how do we even begin to reconcile those two sides of the same person?
Well, a lot of it can be traced back to a letter Einstein wrote to President Roosevelt in 1939.
Oh, urging the U.S. to look into atomic research.
Exactly. Now remember, this was a time when the Nazis were gaining power, and the thought of them developing atomic weapons before anyone else was terrifying, to say the least.
Absolutely. So even though Einstein was a pacifist at heart, he
Right.
felt compelled to act.
Exactly. He knew the potential consequences of inaction. Can you imagine the weight of that decision? Knowing that his warning could potentially lead to the development of such a destructive force?
It must have been agonizing. And I can't imagine it got any easier when those weapons became a reality.
It didn't. He later called signing that letter one of his biggest regrets, saying that if he'd known the Nazis wouldn't actually succeed in building the bomb, he would never have gotten involved.
Oh, wow. Talk about a heavy burden to carry.
To live with the knowledge that his actions, however well-intentioned, ultimately contributed to such devastation, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And yet, as we know, he didn't just sit back and let that guilt consume him. Instead, he dedicated a large part of his later years to advocating for peace and nuclear disarmament.
Absolutely. I think that really speaks volumes about his character. He recognized the tremendous responsibility that came with scientific progress. It's not just about knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's about wielding that knowledge ethically, compassionately.
I mean, those are lessons that we're still grappling with today, right?
100%. In some ways, his story is more relevant than ever.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? It's like
Yeah.
we celebrate these incredible leaps in science and technology, but we don't always think about the potential downsides that come with that progress.
It's like opening Pandora's box. Once you unleash certain knowledge into the world, there's no putting it back in.
Exactly. And to Einstein's credit, he seemed to understand that from a deeply personal place. He didn't just voice concerns about nuclear weapons, he actively campaigned against them.
Right, absolutely. He used his platform to speak out against the nuclear arms race, to advocate for peace and diplomacy. He even wrote to world leaders, urging them to find alternatives to violence and war.
He really put his whole heart into it, didn't he? It wasn't just some publicity stunt to him. It was a deeply held conviction.
You can really feel the weight of his words, the urgency in his pleas for peace. One of his most famous quotes, the one about World War IV being fought with sticks and stones, it sends chills down my spine every time I hear it.
Because it's a chilling reminder, right, that all our technological progress means nothing if we end up destroying ourselves.
It's like he was looking ahead, seeing the potential for both incredible advancement and utter destruction, and he knew that the choices we made, individually and collectively, would determine which path we ended up on.
So are you saying that Einstein's message, his call for peace and responsibility, is even more relevant today than it was back then?
100%. I mean, think about it. We're living in an age of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, space exploration. The pace of technological advancement is mind-blowing.
It's a little terrifying if you think about it too hard.
It is. And that's exactly why we need to be having these conversations, asking ourselves the tough questions about the ethical implications of these new technologies. What are the potential downsides, the unintended consequences?
It's like Einstein is challenging us, isn't he? Daring us to be as thoughtful and compassionate as we are, innovative and ambitious.
Exactly. He's saying, look, we have these incredible tools at our disposal, but it's up to us to use them wisely.
To make sure that our pursuit of knowledge and progress doesn't come at the cost of our humanity and our planet.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, that harmony between scientific progress and ethical responsibility.
Well, I think that's a pretty profound note to end on. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's a conversation that I hope we can all continue to have, both on a personal level and as a global community. Because as Einstein so powerfully demonstrated, the future really is in our hands.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the choices we make each day, the impact we have on the world around us.
And the responsibility we all share for creating a future where knowledge and compassion go hand in hand.
I like that. Knowledge and compassion.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, that wraps up another deep dive.
Until next time, everyone.
Keep those questions coming and never stop exploring the wonders of our universe. And who knows, maybe along the way we'll even learn a thing or two from a certain genius with wild hair and a passion for peace.